All right, let's jump right in with a pretty provocative question. What if the very foundation of modern religion, I'm talking about the idea of one single God, is actually the source of humanity's greatest conflicts? It's a huge claim, right? Well, today we're diving into a fascinating sermon from 1994 by Ryuho Okawa that makes that exact argument. He presents this really radical diagnosis of our divided history and, honestly, an even bolder vision for a unified future.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down. We're going to follow the sermon's logic, step by step. First up, we'll get a feel for just how urgent things felt back when he gave this speech. Then, we'll really dig into his main point about religious conflict and his, let's just say, controversial take on monotheism. After that, we'll check out his alternative idea for how the divine world actually works. And finally, we'll see the master plan he proposes for a brand new global religion.
So right from the get-go, this sermon isn't some gentle prayer. It's more like an alarm bell ringing loud and clear. The speaker paints this picture of the world back in 1994, standing at a massive crossroads. He's basically saying humanity is staring down a choice, a really profound, irreversible choice.
And yeah, he lays out that choice in the absolute starkest terms you can imagine. Hope or ruin. That's it. He calls it a year of determination, and he's not messing around. He's insisting that the entire fate of the world, literally everything, is hanging on the decision we're all about to make.
And the stakes he's talking about? They're biblical. We're talking salvation on one side, and on the other, a catastrophe on the scale of Noah's Ark. It's this intense feeling of an impending crisis, and this sense that it's all on us, that really sets the stage for his entire argument.
Okay, so if we're in that much trouble, what's the actual problem? What's the root cause? Well, according to this sermon, it's not what you might think. It's not politics, it's not economics. Nope. He argues that the fundamental source of all our division is religion itself.
The argument here is that all through history, we see this really destructive pattern play out again and again. Whenever a new divine teaching or a new prophet shows up, the older, more established religions, they just stubbornly refuse to accept them. And this creates this vicious cycle of rejection, which leads to resentment and then, eventually, to conflict and even war.
And he gives a really clear example of this pattern. The sermon points out that, the Quran actually recognizes Moses and Jesus as legitimate prophets from God. But when Muhammad came with his message, he was, for the most part, rejected by the Jewish and Christian communities that were already there. The older faiths, he argues, just wouldn't give the new one a stamp of approval.
And you can see the same thing happening even earlier, according to the sermon. Think about it. Many Jewish people in the first century were waiting for a Messiah who would be this powerful king, right? A military leader, a political savior. And then Jesus shows up, a carpenter's son, a spiritual teacher, talking about a kingdom in heaven, who ends up being crucified. He just didn't fit the mold of what they were expecting, and so he was rejected.
So that begs the question, right? Why does this keep happening? What's the deep-seated reason for this constant rejection of new teachings? Well, this is where the speaker zooms in on what he sees as the core of the problem, that foundational pillar of the Abrahamic faiths, the idea of one and only one God.
And this is where things get really controversial. The sermon asks this incredibly challenging question. What if the idea of a single, exclusive God is the very thing that breeds intolerance? I mean, think about it. If you believe our God is the only God, then logically, every other religion has to be wrong. It almost sets you up for conflict. Now, to back this up, the sermon actually dives right into the scriptures. It points to the Old Testament, for instance, where you see different names for God, like Yahweh and Elohim. The argument is that maybe these weren't just different names, but originally referred to different divine beings. Then it turns to the Quran and notes how often Allah speaks using we. The sermon suggests this isn't just the royal we, like a king would use, but a literal we, as in a whole council of spirits working together.
So, the conclusion he comes to is pretty startling. He claims that this idea of strict monotheism is actually a huge misunderstanding. That the belief in one exclusive, solitary God isn't some ultimate divine truth, but a human idea. And it's an idea that has fueled division and war for centuries.
Okay, so after breaking down that whole traditional model, the sermon offers a totally different way of looking at the divine. If it's not one single God, then what is it? Well, the answer he gives is this idea of a cooperative, a multifaceted spiritual reality.
The central idea he introduces is something called the light angels. The sermon explains that there's this group of very high-level spiritual beings, and they all work together from the heavens, and their job is to systematically send teachers, prophets, and guides down to earth, to different places at different times, all to help humanity evolve.
And you can really see this idea in action with this timeline from the sermon. It's wild. It basically traces a single spiritual stream flowing through all of history, connecting these major figures who are separated by thousands of years and miles. So you have Hermes in ancient Greece, then Buddha over in India, and Jesus in Israel. And it presents them not as rivals starting competing religions, but as different parts of one big, coordinated divine plan.
I mean, this just flips the whole narrative on its head, right? If you look at it this way, Judaism, Buddhism, Christianity, they're not in competition anymore. They're more like successive chapters in the same story. Each one is a different lesson, kind of tailored for a specific culture at a specific time, but all coming from the same source, all part of one massive heavenly plan.
And that brings us to the grand finale of the sermon. So after diagnosing the problem and laying out this whole new way of seeing history, it offers up the solution. And it's a big one, a call to action to create a totally new kind of global religion.
And this sermon is crystal clear on this. Overcoming our religious differences is the single most important challenge we face. To avoid that ruin he talked about at the beginning, and actually choose hope, we have to finally move beyond the divisions that have plagued us for, well, all of history.
And he doesn't just talk about it, he lays out a 4-step plan to get there. Okay, so step 1, we have to recognize that all the major religions actually come from the same divine source. Step 2, we need to synthesize, basically pull together the core truths from all of them. Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, all of them. Step 3, use that to create a new teaching that doesn't conflict with any of them but actually honors them. And the final step, step 4, establish a world religion that's founded on 2 key principles, freedom and tolerance. So in the end, the sermon argues that this new teaching, which, by the way, the speaker identifies as the foundation for his own movement, Happy Science, it has to be truly global. It can't be like the older faiths that are often tied to one specific culture or ethnic group. The whole point is for it to be a universal truth that can, as he puts it, save all humanity.
And really, that's the ultimate question the sermon leaves us with. It presents this incredible vision where all these ancient, bloody conflicts are healed by a new, universal way of seeing things. But it kind of puts the ball back in our court, leaving us to wonder, are we, as a species, actually ready to embrace a shared future, or are we going to stay stuck in our divided past?